Hi, I'm Representative Greg Cheney. We're about a week away from the State of the State address that will kick off the 2017 legislative session. I thought now would be a good time to give you a preview of what you can expect to see in the coming months. As a member of the House Revenue and Taxation Committee, I'm most excited to get to work for you, finding ways to return more of your hard-earned cash. The money that the state spends every year doesn't belong to the state. It belongs to you, and you should keep it. A healthy and vibrant economy relies on the lowest tax rate possible. We're coming into the session with a large surplus, money that we weren't counting on being there when we set the budget a year ago. I'm confident that we'll be able to put together a package that gives you back more of your money. I'm also confident that with that much extra money in the state coffers, that proposals are going to be presented on how to spend that money rather than return it to you. Above all else, I'm committed to making sure that what you've earned stays in your pocket. I would expect that our taxes will be reduced for incomes for individuals and corporations alike. I would advocate for tax policy that would benefit the most Idahoans and create the most jobs. Things like eliminating the grocery sales tax, a tax that affects every Idahoan, and something that creates a competitive disadvantage for our businesses up and down the Oregon-Washington border. And while we're speaking of tax policies that create competitive disadvantages, with the Christmas season wrapping up and a lot of us having done online shopping, it brings up again the fact that Idaho doesn't require that Amazon collect Idaho sales tax on Amazon purchases. There are complex legal issues that have kept this discussion in the background in the past. But let me just say this. The current status quo creates a competitive disadvantage for those businesses within the state of Idaho that help create the jobs, pay for the schools and the roads, and incentivizes Idahoans to send their money to a large multinational out of state. And while I wouldn't support increasing the tax burden on Idaho consumers, I would support a bill that would collect this tax as a way of granting additional tax relief for Idahoans and Idaho small businessmen and women. And speaking of taxes, it was just 2 years ago that the transportation discussion yielded an increase to the registration fee and gas tax for Idahoans. One thing that I walked away from that discussion with was a real appreciation for just how broken our existing funding system for transportation needs is. You see, the old dedicated funding system assumed that there was always going to be a rational connection between the number of miles somebody drives and the number of gallons of fuel they purchase. But that model, thanks to new technology and economic growth, just isn't keeping up with demand or even inflation. 2 years ago, we were told that we couldn't tap the general fund to correct this problem. Many of us advocated for reaching into the ever-expanding general fund to fund these transportation needs instead of raising taxes. But those who opposed that idea argued that if we put transportation in the general fund, that each and every year, transportation priorities and education priorities would be in competition with one another for scarce resources. And to a degree, I see their point. But now this year, there will be many other proposals for projects that would be funded out of the general fund. Most of these projects can't be controlled cost-wise nearly as easily as transportation. With transportation, if you have a lean year, you can delay a widening project, or you can put a load limit on a bridge to delay having to do extensive repairs. But with things like early childhood education and healthcare, projects and programs that have spiraled out of control in their cost in other states, the competition to other priorities is far greater than transportation ever would have been. So I suspect, among other things, that what you'll see in 2017 are a number of people in the State House having to walk back hardline positions they took in 2015 over just what it took to compete with education funding. I'll be sure to be your watchdog on that. On the education front, the big story of the last several weeks has been an audit that showed that over 99% of school administrators failed to meet expectations in how they conducted their teacher evaluations. Let's look at this from a purely logical point of view before we look at any of the specifics. And I want to appeal to any of you with any leadership experience at all. Whether you've been the CEO of a corporation or the team lead at a restaurant, if you have any leadership experience, consider this. If you're tasked with accomplishing something, and over 99% of the people you're working with aren't meeting your expectations, thinking purely logically, is the problem with them or with you and your leadership? It looks like this situation was caused by a combination of wasted taxpayer money being spent on an audit with completely erroneous criteria and unclear and inconsistent messages about expectations coming out of Boise. We'll know more in due time, but what we know for sure is this. This whole snafu is the product of an undeniable failure of leadership in Boise and not a product of the hardworking administrators and educators who do their very best to educate our youth despite a spiderweb of red tape that the state and federal governments put in their way. As a final word, I'd like to comment on something that happened this week with national and international implications. This week, the Obama administration announced that it was going to expel a number of diplomats and impose sanctions on Russia for allegedly hacking and releasing information that proved damaging to Hillary Clinton. I'm troubled by the way this whole thing has played itself out. While I agree that it's very important that we're vigilant about foreign interference in our elections and in our government, that we need to focus on cybersecurity and keeping our private and public sector secure, and that Vladimir Putin isn't exactly a friend of American interests. It concerns me greatly that the Obama administration didn't take seriously cybersecurity concerns surrounding its own Secretary of State when she was violating security protocols with a private server. On the contrary, this administration attempted to help sweep under the rug all of these issues in an attempt to protect that Secretary of State's presidential ambitions. And the Obama administration didn't seem too awfully concerned with foreign influence when its own Secretary of State, once again, was accepting large confirmed donations to her Clinton Foundation from governments with which she was negotiating in her official capacity as Secretary of State. It seems that the outgoing administration thinks that these things are no big deal if they benefit a fellow Democrat. But dare to inconvenience a Clinton, and suddenly you have a crisis far bigger than the invasion of Crimea or the carnage in Syria. It would have to be a bigger crisis because in those instances, Obama laid down and let Putin do whatever he wanted to. This is a big enough issue for Obama to finally stand up to Vladimir Putin. I know that we need to know more about what Russia did and didn't do in an attempt to influence our presidential election. But since Obama and his administration never stood up to Putin or took cybersecurity or foreign influence seriously until it took a toll on a political ally, well, that makes it seem that this entire thing is just a political tantrum being thrown over the results of the election by a lame duck president on his way out. I would invite you to join me Monday night at 8 o'clock Mountain Time as I go live with my first ever virtual town hall meeting. This is your opportunity from the comfort of your own home, from your smartphone or computer, to ask me questions about issues of importance to you. I'll also be communicating my take on the governor's State of the State address from earlier in the day. That'll be Monday, January 9th at 8 o'clock p.m. Mountain Time. To register or to log in to the presentation, visit CheneyForIdaho.com or watch for a link on our Facebook page. Thank you for watching. God bless.